Hello friends, welcome to An Abundance of Books. My name is Julia and today we're talking about arcs. I have recently rejoined NetGalley, the first time since I've had a booktube channel, and I've gotten some really exciting arcs. And so this is a new series, hopefully, to show publishers that I'm worth it. I have got 3 arcs to share with you. I'm hoping to do this every 3. I bought this beautiful notebook that I'm obsessed with to record all of my thoughts. My writing is very messy, don't look. And I just want to give you a heads up on what's out there, what I'm enjoying. All of the books that we're going to talk about today got 4 stars. Some of them I'm super obsessed with right now. So I hope that you'll be interested in at least one of them. I'm going to talk about everything spoiler free, but there are some things I'm going to talk more specifically about. There's some romance stuff that I want to talk about, and so like, can you really spoil a romance? We'll talk about it all when we get there, but I'm going to go through these in publication order. The first 2 are actually already out, but within the last month, so you too can read these incredible books. Alright, first up we have Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. This came out on June 28th. It is 256 pages and I read it via the audiobook, which had a full cast. Patricia Wants to Cuddle is a Bachelor show that I didn't know when I picked this up. I truly just saw the cover and the title and I thought it sounded great. But no, it starts off with a Bachelor style show called The Catch. I want to say it was called The Catch. They all get confused in my mind. But it opens with the final 4 women heading to a remote location to film one of the weeks. It starts with them on a ferry to the island. And the first half is really just a character study of the final 4 women as well as the producer, Casey. It's got a lot of the standard Bachelor fare that you're in for. You've got all of your classic archetypes, but you start to see some mysterious things on the island, and then by the 50% mark, it turns into a horror story. And once that action starts, it does not stop. This book, while I only gave it 4 stars, I think it's going to be one of my most recommended books ever because I think it's a great way to dip into horror, but it's got a lot of other stuff that people want. Like, you've got a Bachelor show, so you've got romance stuff, messy drama stuff, reality TV production stuff. But then you're also in the wilderness, so it's a survival story. It's also a sapphic story. There's so many people who can use this as an entry point into some really interesting horror that is primarily just gory. I didn't find it super suspenseful. I think part of the issue is the cover, and they're in Washington, and people keep seeing like a hairy guy out in the distance. And it's like, if this was real life, everyone would just say Bigfoot immediately, you know? Even if it's not Bigfoot, there's a whole genre of TV shows hunting Bigfoot. People would say Bigfoot, and that bugs me, but that's pretty typical. You know how every zombie movie or book has to come up with a new name for the zombies? It's kind of like that, which is just sort of standard fare for the genre. There's also some true crime stuff in here. Years ago, there were some women on a hiking trip to the island and they mysteriously disappeared and were never found. So you get some like true crime excerpts, because also this has some multimedia stuff. When you have a Bachelor book, it is required by law, in all of the ones that I've read, I've probably read 3 at this point, to have like a chat log, or I want to call it a chat room, but it's definitely not a chat room. It's just like a comment section on a blog. Then there's also some articles about the sister of one of the women who went missing. And then you've also got some like letters from the past expanding on the people who live on Otter's Island. There's so much good stuff in here. It crams a lot into those 250 pages, but in a really seamless way. I think 250 pages is the perfect amount because you want your horror to be fast. If you're not going to be building dread the whole time, which like you tried to do a little bit, it just didn't work for me, but that's fine, then you just gotta go for it. Whenever I'm reading a horror book, I also try to think of the deeper meanings behind stuff. Horror generally is meant to reflect society's trepidations, shall we say. So this is a very interesting one because you could sort of see it from both sides. Maybe I'll let you come to your own conclusion, but discussions of lesbianism and sapphic relationships is very prevalent in this book, and I think it's interesting having that incorporated into a horror story. Just as I said that, I think I had a revelation. This book is great. You should read this book. The reason that I gave it a 4 and not a 5 is going from the Bachelor stuff to the horror stuff is a really hard sell, and the two just don't mesh together. It's like you got a Bachelor book and a horror book, and both of them are great. Together, it just didn't have enough connective tissue. I also think this has some interesting stuff to say about reality TV and true crime. I think the pairing of those is a really interesting idea. That would be the through line, if anything, but I wish that it was explored a little bit more. I feel like as I'm talking about it, I'm convincing myself to give it a 5, but I'm not. Anyway, that was Patricia Wants to Cuddle. Highly, highly recommend. The audiobook is very good. It is full cast, but I don't know that the full castness of it is the best utilized. I wouldn't say that I recommend the audiobook over the physical book. I think that the audiobook is good, but it didn't elevate it too much. Next up, we have A Prayer for the Crown Child by Becky Chambers. This came out July 12th, so last week. Hopefully I'm getting this video up in time. I did this on audio. It had a single narrator, but they were very good. And the physical book comes in at about 160 pages. I think the audiobook length was around 4 hours. I didn't write that down. I probably should have written it down. And I gave this one 4 stars. I love Becky Chambers. I've read a lot of her stuff. The first one I thought was fine, but didn't give me exactly what I wanted. I gave it a 3-star. I get what it was going for, but it didn't give me what I wanted. This book finally was giving me what I wanted. You are dropped straight in from the first book. There's no preamble, no recap of what happened last time, and it also ends very abruptly, setting up for another book. It's separated into 6 parts, which I think are sort of seen as episodes, so I feel like this is meant to be one large story, which I think you can take however you will. Personally, I would like to see it all in a contained single book story, but I know that's not other people's preference. This book is also sort of hard to spoil, so I'm gonna talk pretty openly about it, even though it's the second book in a series. So the setup of the first one is that the robots just got up and walked away one day and have been living in the wilderness ever since, away from human civilization, and humanity sort of crumbled after that but has worked its way back up. It's a very hippie kind of world now in a really nice way. And then the main character Dex, who uses they them pronouns, happens across one of the robots and is bringing the robot into civilization because the robot has been tasked by the other robots to figure out how humanity's doing, basically. The robot that we're following is named Moscap. But the thing that I love about Becky Chambers is exploring human stories through non-human entities. And the robot is great for this because it's just discovering how people work. It's able to ask all of the dumb questions. One of my favorite parts explores PEBs, which are like the currency in this world, but they don't use it like money, and there's a discussion of like everyone sharing and having what you need, how capitalism has messed everything up. That is one thing I think that this does benefit from the audiobook, because I think the nature of it just like being a story told to you does really work, and because it's not a single contained story, I don't know, I feel like that lends itself as well. There's other really interesting discussions in here. Moscap has to get a part replaced, and there's a discussion of, are you your body or are you not? And it contains sort of a critique of work culture. What do you call it? There's definitely productivity culture, maybe is what it's called, that you're allowed to just be, and it's a lot about like sitting in the moment and letting the world happen around you. It's also a place where everybody is queer and nobody is misgendered, and Dex's family is a sprawling one. It's sort of polyamory, but not really. It's not a contained family unit. Everyone has different relations with basically everyone in the community. The family tree is just a whole tree. And the way that they talk about it is really sweet, and again, everything gets explained to Moscap, which is really fun. I think the thing that holds this back for me is Dex. I don't love them. I think that my view of what a monk should be in a series called The Monk and the Robot is different from what Becky Chambers is putting out, which is totally fine. Like, that's their choice. I just don't, it just doesn't jive with me. I think Dex is kind of annoying and a little bit whiny. and just not the stoic person that I want. They definitely do have some conversations about like what the label of monk means to them, and those are fine, but those aren't going to get me to like the character anymore. I think I would categorize this as cozy sci-fi. I know we have cozy fantasy. Do we have cozy sci-fi yet? Because it's not low sci-fi. Like, it is low sci-fi, but I think so much so that the sci-fi barely counts. I think it's more like cozy sci-fi of a hippie utopia. I think that if you like Becky Chambers' other work, you're gonna like this. And if you didn't like the first In the Monk and the Robot, this might be more your speed like it was for me. I don't think I've ever actively disliked a Becky Chambers, at least. Okay, last book. This one was extremely exciting when I was approved for it because it is Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. I read their previous book, Something to Talk About, and loved it. Like, I have very clear memories of getting my car serviced and sitting in the waiting area and reading this book. That one could not have been more different from this one. That one was very much a slow burn. They don't get together until like the last 10%. There's one sex scene and then it's over. This one, there's a sex scene in the first chapter. This one is pretty much all romance and no plot. It is the story of Cassie, who is a college senior who hooks up with this woman at a bar one night, only to discover the next day that the woman is her best friend's mom. And as you can imagine, hijinks ensue from there. It's a great romance though because it manages to both be fast and slow burn. Like, they have that initial encounter and like boom, but then their relationship changes a lot after they know who each other are. My big problem with this book is that the romance seems to be the only thing that had like care paid to it. I think that the plotting is rough and I think that the side characters are rough, but you're reading a romance for the romance, and I think that was super strong. The big problem is that Cassie is at college and Aaron is at home, not in the same city, so there are a lot of plot contrivances in order to have them be able to interact with each other. It never felt natural, like not one time. I do question why they weren't both in the same city, you know? Like, that could have solved so many problems, but I'm not an author. I don't know anything. I also think that this book was too long. Oh, I didn't do my stats. Let me do my stats because I wrote them down. This book comes out on October 11th, so you've got a lot of time. I read it by the ebook and it was 352 pages. And I think 352 pages was too much. I think that there was a lot of time wasted, sort of. Not wasted, but like fat that could be trimmed. This book also does a good job of acknowledging how weird it is, both in their age difference and in how they relate to each other through the daughter/friend. And I think you do have to acknowledge it in a book like this, but they acknowledged it a lot. Like, it gets tiring after a while. You just want them to like be happy to be together, because if they're not happy about it, you have a hard time being happy about it, you know what I mean? But I thought that it was a really fun time. I think that Cassie and Aaron were a great couple. There are a lot of steamy scenes in here, like a lot, and they are very explicit, but enjoyable. The problem was just like they would have an encounter and then 4 months would go by when they were just doing school and work, and neither of them really had their lives outside of each other fleshed out. They both had like friends and careers that they talk about, but it was always just surface level. Like, Erin was a doctor and we never saw her do any doctoring at all. Now I'm going to do a little bit of spoilers for this. If you are not interested in that, thank you so much. Goodbye. Have a good day. For those of you who are still here, I want to talk about the way that Erin talks about herself. I think when the book starts, she's 38 and she is very aware of her body. She talks a lot about sagging and stuff, you know, which is fine. My problem is that it was never resolved. It was just sort of Erin being down on herself and talking about how hot Cassie was because she's 21 and hot. And I just wish that we had been able to see that from Cassie's perspective, because Cassie didn't have anything negative to say about Erin ever. It could have been an interesting conversation, or even just like a nice assurance thing, a nice moment for them of like, you have an insecurity, I accept you how you are, you know? Like, it just didn't feel good to have Erin down on herself for no reason, and that it never gets resolved. The last thing I think is sort of a major spoiler. Should I not talk about it because this doesn't come out until October? I can talk about it vaguely enough. The major conflict in this is resolved off page, and that is so annoying because the whole book's sort of been building to this thing and then it's just done. Like, you get there and they're like, yeah, it's fine. I think I understand what the author was trying to do by having like the opposite of a miscommunication trope, sort of, but it didn't work. It felt like something that needed to be explicitly talked about, and it just sort of left me overall feeling unsatisfied in an otherwise very satisfying book. Anyway, those are the first 3 arcs that I have read on this channel. Hopefully there will be many more to come. I got approved for one today, which I'm very excited about. So hopefully you will be seeing me very shortly. Leave a comment below. Let me know if I've convinced you to read any of these books. If there's anything specific that you want to know about an arc, let me know. A lot of this can just sort of be found on Goodreads. This is more just my opinion on it. All of my reviews are on Goodreads as well, if you're interested. But yeah, if there's anything specific, I would like to be able to pitch these books to you as effectively as I can. Alright, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye.